Hey guys, this is Ken McElroy, and you are listening to the Mailbox Money Show with Bronson Hill.
Welcome to the Mailbox Money Show. What if you could do what you love and make money? A lot of times we think it's either you make the money or you do what you love, but what if those things actually could be combined? Well, my friend today, Craig Siegel, he's a Wall Street and USA Today #1 bestselling author of the Reinvention Formula. He's a keynote speaker. He's done a TEDx talk, host of the podcast called the CLS Experience. And he's been endorsed by people like Jim Kwik, Ed Mylett, and has done 8 marathons. He's just a very inspirational guy. But I think what I really liked about this conversation is it really is getting down to the things that matter. Now, whether you are someone who wants to build a brand and you want to be an influencer or make a difference in the world, or you're just somebody who wants to really lead your family well, or you're stuck in a job that's like, hey, I really want to be doing something different, or stuck in your business, this guy, he's got something to share for you. So I'm really excited for this interview. Let's jump in and let's get started the Mailbox Money Show. Welcome to the Mailbox Money Show. I'm your host, Bronson Hill. I'm really excited to be here with Craig. Craig, really good to have you here, brother, and excited to hear more of your story. You're super inspirational. You're like a superhero, man. You've kind of done everything that you could possibly do. So, why don't you give people a little bit of your background, Wall Street, kind of some of the things you did, and kind of what led you to be able to, like you said, even before we started recording, create the life you wanted to create, where you can make more money than you thought was possible doing what you love.
Yeah, beautiful, brother. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm super pumped to be here. I think that there's a big misconception that you can't do what you love and also make a ton of money. I would say this, I would just share this with your audience. I think that the riskiest thing that we can do is to play it safe. And so to
Yeah.
take it back a little bit, I was on Wall Street for 13 years. I was having a ton of success, and I put that in quotations because obviously as you evolve, so does your definition of success. At the time, I was making a lot of money. I was doing well. It's a top brokerage at my company, had the pretty girlfriend, all the things. But ultimately, Wall Street stopped becoming as much fun as it once was. And so I pivoted from that, from basically being a stockbroker, and I started my own company where we were allocating working capital and loans to different businesses across the country. Although very lucrative, wasn't exactly why I'm here. And I started to feel a little bit burned out because even though I give everything I got to everything I do, I was waking up every day and I just didn't feel super connected to the mission. And I think a lot of people resonate with that because even when we were doing the TED Talk, I was doing some homework. And as it turns out, 80% of Americans don't find purpose in the work that they do. That's a pretty
Yeah.
alarming number, but I was one of them. And so I started running a bunch of marathons because I was kind of looking just to get uncomfortable and expand myself, and that was great. Fast forward the pandemic, and just keep in mind, I'd kind of been in a little bit of a rock bottom place personally. My best friend, my dad, had just gotten diagnosed with cancer. I just got out of a toxic relationship. I was yearning for something else. I just wasn't able to put it together. But during the lockdown, when I shut down my office, what I thought would be 2 weeks, is when I really got spiritual and really began to connect. And that's when I started receiving those downloads. I've been obsessed with personal development for 15 years. I utilize it to be successful in different arenas, like building relationships, your network, Wall Street, etc. I just didn't realize that personal development was actually my gift, my calling. And
Yeah.
so I created my CLS brand, kind of figured out a 10-lane highway to come at the world with, each lane representing a different way to make an income, but also, more importantly, make an impact. Coaching, speaking, TED Talk, deal flow, all the other things, reverse engineered it. I leaned in. And for the first time in my life, I was in alignment. Over the last 4.5 years, it really exploded. Speaking all over, just spoke with the United Nations, our book, coaching, the podcast, all the things. Just got married, my favorite part.
Oh,
So it wasn't
congrats.
just the career reinvention. It was really just the whole consciousness. And one of the things I'm excited to share with your audience today is you can absolutely find what you love, connect to that, share it with the world, and unapologetically make a lot of money doing so.
I love it. I love it. So you said something, you said a lot of things in there that are really interesting to me. And let's talk about that for a minute. 80% of people don't like what they do for work, or they're not engaged. They don't feel like they come alive. And I mean, that's most people. That's probably most of our listeners. A lot of people that
Crazy.
are doing, I always think it's someone else, but a lot of times we're like, what is the sign of somebody who's really not engaged or is not really enjoying what they're doing? It doesn't align with their purpose. And what is like, why do you think that is? Like, that's like the vast majority of people. Like, why do you think that number's so high?
Phenomenal question. I think that, like in my case, I didn't grow up knowing exactly what I wanted to do. And so ultimately, I just got in different arenas. I wanted to try some things. Wall Street probably lasted longer than I expected to. And I wouldn't change a thing. I learned so much there, discipline, how to become a man, etc. But a lot of people don't take the time to get clarity on what I actually want to do. I would say in 2025, where we're at now, in entrepreneurship, I think there's never been a better time ever to really put yourself out there, to build a brand, to find what you love, to figure out different ways to make money. And because people don't really take the time to articulate what it is that they love or good at or want to do, they end up doing something that they don't necessarily feel super aligned with. And so at some point, they typically either get burnt out or disengaged. And what are the signs? I don't know, maybe showing up late to work, not super enthusiastic, not giving it your all, maybe drinking a little bit more than you'd like to admit, which is something I was doing at the end of my Wall Street career, if I'm being vulnerable. Whatever it is, you can tell when someone's soul is lit up and when they have to manufacture excitement. Big difference.
Yeah, it is a big difference. I mean, it's the idea of somebody who's, like you said, lit on fire, or somebody who's just kind of there. Sometimes we have that, and then we lose it over time because we get into kind of like we're settled in. And it's just, I think it is so important. I think the older I get, I went through a divorce, about 8 years ago, and started looking at what I was doing. I was working in medical device sales, making good money, making 250K a year, but I was like, it wasn't fulfilling, and I was working a lot. I didn't like what I was doing, and so I started kind of ask some of those questions. But I mean, what do you think? I guess for someone who's discovering, because I think the first thing before you look at brand and all these things to do, you got to figure out, what are you here to do, and what are you good at? So what are some of the steps that you take people through on the personal development to kind of figure out some of those things of like, what am I actually here to do? What makes me come alive?
Yeah. One of the things I talk about in our book, The Reinvention Formula, which is very tangible, which is good for everybody listening, is if you're really not sure, and let's just say you're listening to this conversation, like, wow, I don't really love what I do. I would love to find something that I felt really connected to, that I can make a lot of money doing. I would start with two separate lists. Just jot down maybe 5 to 10 things that you absolutely love. I mean, no filter, it doesn't matter what it is. Give yourself permission to look silly. Whatever the 10 things are, 10 different things that you love. Separate list, 10 things that you're good at, some skill sets, maybe some of your superpowers. At some point in the middle, there's going to be some commonality. So for me, I could communicate effectively. That was one of my gifts. And I was obsessed with personal development. So I kind of married the two. And then naturally, all right, let's help people. Let's speak. Let's coach. And let's do a podcast, etc. And so for me, that's how I found it. For anyone listening, you must, not can, must take some time to create white space and really connect and get those downloads. One of the mistakes I made, brother, was that working on Wall Street, as you can imagine, it's you going 500 miles an hour, right?
Yeah.
You stop, you're getting run over. So I never took the time to just reassess and connect. The lockdown during the pandemic for me was almost like a forced pivot, but boy, did I need it. And
Yeah.
so I would just share with anybody, don't wait till a pandemic, God forbid, to take some time. Take some time this week, whether that's go for a walk or meditate, connect, whatever your thing is, and just connect and find out what do you love, what are you good at, and let's start getting some data.
Yeah, 100%. No, I think it's so good to take the time. I think a lot of times we're head down in the business or in the job that we don't take any time to reflect. And I think that's what I tell myself and others as well, is like, you're working hard, but don't just work in the business, like take a step back and like really figure out, are you getting the results that you want to get? Because a lot of times you're doing something and you're moving forward, but it may not even be the direction you really want to go, because success in what you were doing or what I was doing, it led to like more work and more burnout and more all this stuff. But when you
Yeah.
actually take a step back and you're like, like, am I getting the results that I want to get? And if the answer is no, like I'm more stressed out than I want to, okay, maybe I'm making money or maybe I'm not making money. And like but just like looking at those things, I think is just incredibly valuable. But how can somebody who's really busy, and maybe they have kids at home or whatever, like what are some ways you think, is it just like, I'm going to schedule a Friday afternoon just to go to coffee and just kind of like journal about it? Or what are some ways people can explore, kind of create that space? Is it a weekend getaway?
I think all the above, right? And
Yeah.
just a question I would typically ask myself, which is beautiful based on what you just said, and I would encourage everybody to ask this. Am I busy or am I productive? Because
Yeah.
if you just beautifully articulated, it's very easy to get caught in the weeds, especially if you have your own business, where you're working so much in the business, not necessarily on it. And I was guilty of that for quite a long time. Even now, because of my personality, I feel like you're kind of the same. Like you're a high achiever, you're a
Yeah.
go, you want to get stuff done. That's not really where the game-changing ideas come from when you're just grinding. They come from a step back when you can actually get those downloads. And so, look, for me, like right now, I work 4 days a week. That's something new that I started in 2025. Just to be clear, I still work on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But Monday through Thursday are when I have scheduled meetings. And then Friday is a lot of white space. It's impromptu meetings, events, speaking, whatever the case may be. And so I would encourage everybody in your calendar, put some white space. So maybe that is going to the coffee shop. Maybe it is going for a walk or whatever it is that you have to do to kind of step back from it and put yourself in that vibration of being able to connect and receive downloads. But if you don't intentionally, proactively take the time, it will pass you by. So you must schedule time for this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've started doing this about once a quarter. I get away for 2 nights and just, do some whiteboarding and put things up there of like, what are my
That's
goals? What are my values? Am I getting what I want? Am I to pray? And you mentioned kind of a spiritual journey as well. It's like very spiritual a lot of times because a lot of times we're so, I think that the product of a lot of our society and like Wall Street or corporate career or having a business is just like, kind of can be soul sucking, right? You just simply do it, put everything into it, but then you're not actually taking the time to just actually live and realize like, well, is this really actually fulfilling my values? Which I think is really valuable. I want to talk a little bit about personal development and I want to get into brand here in a little bit, but I've noticed there's a huge link between a breakthrough in my personal development. I have a hard conversation with someone. I have a family member I need to resolve something with. I have something that I addressed some pain in my life from when I was a kid. Something happens, and then all of a sudden, it's some big business breakthrough. And I think there's a real link between those two. Talk to me a little bit about why personal development really leads to business or success in life.
I love the question, but really what you're talking about right there is spirituality.
Ah,
And I didn't know, how deep you want to get on this show today, but I'll just
sure.
say spirituality is my favorite thing right now. And I specifically, I study the wisdom of Kabbalah. I would just say this, not to scare anybody. Let's just keep it like service level for this. What does it even mean to be spiritual? That means that you believe that there's something else going on here beyond our logic. And if you can subscribe to that, then you're available. And what you just said is absolutely beautiful. So basically, when you proactively do certain things for the right reasons and the right consciousness, you see an effect or result somewhere else, right? So having a tough conversation, resolving something with your family member, being willing to having patience in the discomfort typically leads to another blessing or miracle somewhere else because it's all connected. So one of the main universal principles of Kabbalah is that there are no coincidences. Everything has a reason and a purpose, including you, including everybody listening. So then how do we find our purpose? How can we know we're on the path our soul is meant to take? How can we live a life full of purpose and meaning? Can we all positively impact others and thereby the world? The answer is yes. And there are universal laws, just like there is gravity. Even if you're a great person and you were to jump out this New York City window, you would go down. There are certain universal laws that we can tap into. Things like doing things without an agenda, without needing recognition. Consciousness is really just the definition of who you are. I know that word gets thrown around a lot. And who you are, you personally and also your listeners, is limitless. And I don't mean the who that we've been told we are, that we think we are. Who we actually are is limitless. And as we raise our consciousness and really begin to tap into that, we can connect to what we would call the light and much more blessings and miracles on an ongoing basis. But it starts with what you just said, being willing to get uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think it's amazing whatever faith someone is. I'm a Christian, and I just feel like in my life I pray and I feel like I get answers to things, or I feel like God's with me. And there's a book out called The Alchemist. I don't know if you read The Alchemist, but it's the idea of this like follow the omens, right? That there will be signs in your life that will lead you to where you need to go. And a lot of times we'll kind of keep going. It's the same thing. And I have a relative who just worked really hard to go after a certain goal, and it was like 8 years. And I was like, bro, like maybe it's time to move to something else. Like it's something people kind of fight against those things. But I think it's so important to live, a life that's like, okay, what am I supposed to be doing, or what's my purpose? What's the value? Because you're right, that is what spirituality is, right? It's really connecting to something greater than I need more money, I need more stuff, I need more whatever that's material. But spiritual is much more, what's the purpose? What's the meaning? What's the value behind it? Which I think is great, which really kind of leads me to brand. So yeah, you talk a lot about personal brand. I'm going to talk because I think it connects to spirituality. A lot of people don't see this connection, but when you're consistent with who you are and you present who you are, your brand should be consistent with that, right? And I think where people have the challenge is they're disconnected. Their brand is totally different from who they are. We look at people like Tiger Woods, where there was this brand of this clean cut guy, whatever, and all of a sudden he's like this player guy with all these different women. Like, I'm not saying like people make mistakes and things like that, but when there's a disconnect between those two, where the brand or the public persona of somebody is different than what their actual kind of who they are, that's what's challenging. So how does somebody stay consistent with building a brand? And sometimes where it can be challenging because, not always what people present is actually what is really going on inside of them.
Couple words come to mind. Number one, this is your greatest superpower, authenticity, right? And it's okay to be vulnerable. And one of the things that you just mentioned, Tiger Woods, who, is one of the GOATs and on the course,
Yeah,
absolutely. But you said there was a big disconnect there. It's probably out of integrity, right? And so everyone was super surprised because he was kind of living a double life, I guess you could say. And
sure.
so that kind of created a different perception of him. I would just say, look, you don't have to share everything with everybody. You're not obligated, but the more vulnerable you're willing to be, the more people connect with you,
Right.
right? So I would just say that clarity breeds conviction. Conviction breeds momentum. And simplicity is mastery. If it's confusing to explain, it's confusing to experience. So you want to be simple, you want to be straightforward, and you want to be able to stand for something. In regards to a personal brand, I mean, when you build your personal brand, you're building an appreciating asset. It opens doors to paid speaking, courses, collaboration, sponsors, private deal flow. Your brand works while you sleep. That's like the modern definition of passive income. So I would just say to anybody, number one, authenticity, and number two, be in integrity. If you don't want to share something, that's okay, but be honest, be as transparent and vulnerable as you're willing to be, and just make sure that you're authentic. Because in a sea of people out there that are building a personal brand or influencers, it's so easy to sniff out like who's not really doing what they say they're going to do, or a lack of integrity is just so obvious in my opinion. And so be in integrity and be authentic, and you won't be for everybody, and that's okay. The right people will filter towards you.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I think in our culture of Instagram polish and all these things that are out there, is people just looking for somebody to be real and be like, hey, I messed up, or here's what happened, or like in our world, it's like, hey, we did a couple deals that didn't go well, right? People that were willing to talk about it and say, hey, we had some real struggles here, or somebody who says, hey, I have this thing in my personal life, and like you say, you don't have to share it, but it does really connect you to people. So let's talk for a little bit about building brand. I think one of the things that I've learned is that one of the most valuable things we can do, especially if there's a lot of passive investors on here, but there's a lot of people that would like to leave a legacy and like to really impact the world, is how you show up is your brand. If you show up to an event and you're in the back and you're dressed sloppily and you're falling asleep and you don't talk to anybody, like that says something. Like you're saying something as you show up. Your brand is how people know you. So what is it, I guess, when it comes to brand, it comes to our reputation and how people know us and how, we use that in our business or to make an impact. Can you talk about how people, like what's a good way to kind of formulate that and to grow your brand?
Yeah, first of all, I think of the word aura with what you were just describing, right? And so the advantage is really authenticity. And people are starving for real. The market is tired of gimmicks. They want your story, your energy, your truth. And energy is absolutely everything, right? And
Yeah.
so, like, look, when you enter a room, your energy will introduce you before you even speak. And so your energy, your aura, it's more powerful, honestly, than an algorithm. And so the more that you put yourself out there, the more authentic that you are, your brand says something. And for anyone listening right now that wants to build a personal brand or wants to put themselves out there, and by the way, I think everybody at this day and age should be considering a personal brand, even if you're not like an entrepreneur, an influencer per se. I think anything you do now is like part of your brand, whether people check out your social media or your red. I mean, if you're applying for a job these days, they probably check out your social media as much as they do your resume,
Yeah.
right? So be intentional is what I would say. And just like, look, you don't have to discover your brand identity. You decide your brand identity, and then you live it and breathe it, and that's contagious.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You said you don't discover it, you decide it. My friend Hunter Thompson, I don't know if you know Hunter Thompson, he's more in the real estate space, but he has a group called Raise Masters. And so he's got maybe 300 or 400 people in his mastermind doing raising capital for different things. And he it talked about he was going to be like the news guy where he was going to like start to do, which is not wrong. He was just going to start to basically provide things around news. And then he decided to go into capital raising and helping other capital raisers. But he just kind of decided, and it's been wildly successful. But I just remember he said he was like it was like a sliding door moment, right, where he made this decision. How do you know when you're going in the right direction or when it's time to pivot when it comes to your brand? I mean, if you're like, hey, this just seems like this is really working, or you know what, this isn't quite working, I need to change. Is that something you revisit, or like you said, you decide? But what if you feel like how do you make that strong conviction around what you decide?
I think one of the beautiful things about just having a human experience is you always have the opportunity to pivot and adjust if need be, right? And so, look, if you're authentic, like you don't have to pivot that. You are who you are. In regards to doing different things, if certain things aren't working, assess it. Why isn't it working? Is there something I can improve? One of the basic spiritual concepts of Kabbalah is I am responsible. So you always want to take responsibility for everything if you can. And then it's like, all right, maybe this was working, but we want to evolve and we'll grow. Or maybe I really felt connected to this particular route a year ago, but now I feel more connected to this. Give yourself permission, right? It's fluid. Like you can do what you feel most connected to. And I would just say, don't ever think that you have to be stuck in a box or typecasted as something else. You can do whatever it is that's one of the beautiful things about having your own brand, right? So even for me, like when I first started, I was kind of the mindset guy. Then everyone wanted to ask me about building a personal brand because we did that in what most people said they never seen anyone do it faster. Then all of a sudden I was the reinvention expert because we wrote the Wall Street Journal bestselling book, The Reinvention Formula. Everyone's like, how did you leave Wall Street, start with nothing and do this? And now it's a lot of spirituality. So I allow those to happen based upon what I feel most in integrity and what I feel most connected to. And so look, Frank Grillo, Hollywood actor, once said this on my podcast and it always stuck with me. I think this is good for everything. There are no rules, right?
Mhm.
You can decide what you want to do and when you want to do it. And ultimately, just be able to have intuition, be able to channel that and figure out what you feel most connected to and what you think will add the most value.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people they struggle with, okay, I've been doing this job. I've been in this thing for a long time. And actually, it feels like a lot of risk to make a change. But a lot of times more of the risk is, like you said, to play small or to not try. And that's when I got approached 40 years old. I'm 44 now, but approached 40, I was like, I don't want to be 75, 80 years old and say, I wish I'd tried. I wish I'd tried to go after my dreams and do what I'm here to do. Why do you think it is that we play small often in what we're doing? We kind of have a small vision and we don't actually go for our dreams. Is it just because it's too scary?
Uh, Really deep conversation. Probably not going to go where you originally thought I was going to say, but I would say the ego. And so the ego, or as Kabbalah we call it the opponent, everybody has one, right? And I think that the ego is a negative force with a positive purpose. It allows us to overcome it so that we have the feeling of earning it. The ego wants us to be born with all this potential and then die with all this potential. But the ego works for the soul. It's customized to you, for you. And the one thing that is constant is change. And so our ego wants us to play small. It wants us to think about what are people going to think about us if I put myself out there, right? What if I look silly? I mean, if you really think about it, what prevents most dreams from coming to fruition? I don't even think it's the fear of failure based upon everybody I coach and I teach. The feedback that I typically get is the fear of judgment. What
Hmm.
if I look bad or what if I look silly? Because if people could try to chase their dreams like in their own home and no one would know about it, they would probably go for it, right? But they have this ego thing, wants you to play small, not leave your comfort zone. And so one of the whole points of life is to be able to overcome that,
Yeah.
right? And so the way that we overcome that is to identify it and realize that we're not here to play small. In fact, quite the contrary, our soul is yearning for expansion. It just wants
Yeah.
to keep evolving, growing, changing, and transforming. And the one thing our soul actually resents is contraction. And I know that from experience because towards the end of my Wall Street career, I was no longer having much fun. I was not very connected to it. And I genuinely felt like my soul was contracting. And I knew that not only was I here for more because I believe we all are, But I knew that if I didn't try this or at least attempt it, I was basically dying a slow death.
Yeah.
So I consider what I like to call the COI, the cost of inaction. And for you, brother, stepping into the unknown after I was, respectfully, I was used to a specific income and lifestyle. For me, I made it so real for myself that I'd literally rather die than go back, play small, and be miserable. And so from that, being able to overcome that very quickly, the fear of the unknown begins to transform into enthusiasm and excitement. So you always have to do work to raise your conscious so that you can identify the ego, because the ego is a false self. It's a lie.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I think it keeps us getting stuck. And I think, being willing, life happens when we put ourselves out there. Really, we don't know what we're capable of. We don't know what's possible. And that's where you see people make radical shifts because they step out.
100%. And
Yeah.
you'll never know unless you're brave enough and you have the courage to do that. And look, will it be uncomfortable? Absolutely. Will there be so much growth? 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Wanted to ask you one more question here, and then how people can get in touch. 'Cause this is a great conversation, but you talk about manufacturing rock bottom, right? You actually can manufacture a rock bottom experience. Can you talk about what that means about manufacturing rock bottom, or instead of just things are going fine, or a lot of times we're willing to step out only when things are bad enough. But is there a way of thinking, if you're comfortable, to kind of manufacture that in your own life?
I think that one of the most dangerous places that anybody could be is things are fine. It's all right. Where the pain is not severe enough that you want to make radical change. And like, I even think about me, like for a few years, I knew in my soul, brother, that something wasn't right. I was out of alignment. I should be probably doing something else in my life, but it wasn't bad enough until I ended up manufacturing a rock bottom. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I have to make a jump because I'm basically dying a slow death here. And so the worst thing people could do is to not make big changes with their life just because things aren't so bad. I don't want anybody to settle for just things aren't so bad. One of my biggest pet peeves is like when you see somebody and you're like, how you doing? And look, I understand not every day is a 10 out of a 10, but when someone's like, oh, just surviving, what? That's okay for you to just survive? Like, what does it come to? That, just another day, just trying to make it through the end of the day. Like, look, I know there's seasons. You said you went through a divorce. I've had my share of things as well, but ultimately that shouldn't be the default. We should always be paying attention, raising our awareness, our consciousness. Do we feel in alignment? Does this feel like something that we should be doing? Are we utilizing the gifts that were given to us? And don't wait, like I did, for a pandemic to really make a radical change. Create the time, like we spoke about earlier in this conversation. I like to call it white space. Reassess, ask yourself the tough questions. And then ultimately, what I love to ask myself, and I tell everybody this, is whether things are going really good or things are going not really good. Always ask yourself, what else is possible?
Hmm.
Because something very powerful about questions. In fact, when you ask questions, you're really connected to, I would say, creator, God, source, divine, Jesus, whatever's good for your listeners. That's when you're really connected. When you have all the answers, you're actually not connected. That's much more ego. So you always want to check in with yourself and ask yourself questions.
I love it. I love the idea of living from possibility where you're not simply, looking at life. It's so easy to look at life as life today is going to be the same as yesterday and tomorrow is going to be the same as today versus like, well, what is possible, right? And you get around people, and that's where getting around different people or getting around different environments, it can really pull you up, right? Because then you're around people that they don't look at, limitations the same way, that anything really is possible. And so that is very contagious. Well, Craig, I want to just say I really appreciate you're a very motivational guy, man. You've really done all kinds of amazing things, investor, speaker, it's your book. I encourage everybody to check it out, The Reinvention Formula. And just really wanted to, I'm actually really looking forward to be on your show as well. But how can people get in touch with you, follow what you're doing, and reach out?
Yeah. First of all, I love the conversation, but I look forward to building a relationship and going deeper with you. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, the CLS Experience, anywhere you buy books, the Reinvention Formula, social media at Kwik Siegel_CLS. And if you like inspirational free nuggets throughout the week, little nuggets of wisdom, you could join our texting community. Just text 917-634-3796 and text the name Bronson so that I know that you heard it here.
Awesome, Craig. Well, great to have you today. Thanks so much. Looking forward to being on your show, and appreciate all your value you're adding to people.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks, man. Okay, awesome interview. Really love Craig. He's awesome. You can see just very inspirational. Really has gone from, hey, how do I get out of this job? How do I get out of what I'm doing to really do what I feel I'm here to do? But then he really gets into a lot of spirituality. And I notice a lot of people that when they become very successful, they often will say, hey, what's the point of all this? What's the purpose behind it? And faith can look different for different people. And so for me, I just think it's so important to have those conversations and to take those step backs of, hey, do the work and then step back and say, am I getting the results I want? Because you can get stuck in just the mire of the day to day. And so, what I try to do in my business now is I try to do work and I try to take full days off. During the week, I take a fair number of days. Last year, I think I took 145 days without work. And I was like, how do you take that much time off? And I said, well, I need to be able to have the time to be able to work in the business and to take time out and really reflect. And so whatever you do for work, even if you're retired, are you giving yourself time and space to say, am I getting the results out of my life that I want? And if not, then it's so important that you take that time for yourself. And there's books I love, like The Gap and The Gain is a great book that talks about this. There's really a lot of books that talk about this. But I'd love to know from you what you got out of this interview. I thought it was great. I think it's great talking about wealth, but it's also important talking about the wealth of life, right? Having time, having financial freedom, but really time freedom to really pursue the things that you're here to do. So thanks for taking the time to educate yourself. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Mailbox Money Show. You've been listening to the Mailbox Money Podcast. For more free resources, articles, and videos, go to bronsonequity.com. There you can download your copy of the special report, The Single Best Investment Strategy During and After a Pandemic. None of the information shared here is an offer to buy a specific investment, and this is for educational purposes only. Consult your financial, legal, and tax professionals and use your own common sense before making any investment decisions. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to tune in next time for more Mailbox Money.